The automatic doors of Sterling and Rose Boutique slid open on a sunny afternoon, and Dr. Maya Richardson stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She saved a young girl's life just 3 days before during an emergency surgery that lasted 11 hours, and today, on her first day off in weeks, she simply wanted to buy a thank you gift for her surgical team. The store gleamed with crystal chandeliers and velvet displays, classical music drifting through air that smelled faintly of expensive perfume. Manager Richard Hartwell glanced up from behind the counter, his jaw tightening the moment he saw her. He whispered something to the security guard, his eyes never leaving Maya as she moved gracefully toward the handbag section. What happened in the next 7 minutes would be captured on 4 different cell phones, shared 8 million times by morning, and ultimately destroy a career built on decades of hidden cruelty. But before we dive into this story, I need to ask you something important. If you believe that justice still matters, that dignity cannot be stripped away by prejudice, and that one person's courage can change everything, hit that like button right now and comment, "Justice prevails" below. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to hear them, who need to know they're not alone, who need to remember that silence protects no one. Subscribe if you want more real stories about ordinary people who refused to accept the unacceptable. Now let me tell you exactly what Richard Hartwell didn't know when he decided Maya Richardson wasn't worthy of his time, when he made the choice that would expose not just his own discrimination, but a system that had protected him for far too long. Maya reached for a leather portfolio, examining the stitching with the careful attention of someone who valued quality, when Hartwell appeared at her elbow. His voice carried across the showroom as he announced that certain items were invitation only and perhaps she'd be more comfortable at a store more suited to her budget. Other shoppers froze, conversations dying mid-sentence as the words hung in the air like smoke. Maya turned slowly, her eyes meeting his with a calmness that came from years of proving herself in operating rooms where one mistake meant death. She asked politely to speak with corporate, requested his name, her voice steady even as her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Hartwell's face flushed red, and he gestured sharply to security, announcing that people like you needed to understand this wasn't that kind of establishment. Phones emerged from purses and pockets, cameras pointing, recording every word as Maya gathered her coat with quiet dignity and walked toward the exit, her head high even as humiliation burned in her chest. Within 3 hours, the video had 500,000 views. By midnight, someone recognized her from a local news story about the pediatric surgeon who'd pioneered a new technique for childhood brain tumors. By morning, the footage had reached Margaret Chen, owner of Sterling and Rose, whose 12-year-old daughter had been wheeled into Maya's operating room 2 years earlier with a hemorrhage that 3 other surgeons had called hopeless. Margaret's hands shook as she watched the video play again, seeing the woman who'd saved her child being treated like a criminal for the crime of shopping while black. She called an emergency board meeting before breakfast, launched an internal investigation by lunch, and what they discovered made her physically ill. Hartwell had buried 43 complaints over 6 years, complaints from customers and employees alike, creating a culture where discrimination thrived in whispered comments and convenient unavailability whenever certain faces walked through the door. Staff members had been told to watch specific shoppers more closely, to suggest they might find better prices elsewhere, to make the store unwelcoming in 1,000 subtle ways that never left fingerprints until now. Hartwell was terminated within 48 hours, his industry contacts severing ties so quickly it was as if he'd never existed, his reputation reduced to a cautionary tale shared in management seminars about the true cost of prejudice. But Maya's response became the real story, the one that mattered beyond viral outrage and corporate apologies. She met with Margaret Chen not to demand compensation, but to discuss systemic change, to create training programs that would address implicit bias rather than simply punish explicit racism. The company didn't just apologize, they transformed, becoming an industry leader in inclusion practices, hiring a diversity board that included Maya herself. Other employees found courage in her example, came forward with their own experiences, creating a wave of accountability that rippled through the entire retail chain. Hartwell's career never recovered, his name now permanently linked to the moment when cameras and courage intersected to expose what had hidden in plain sight for too long. Maya continues her surgical work, saving lives with the same grace she showed that afternoon, but now she also speaks at conferences about dignity, about the exhausting tax of proving your humanity in spaces that should welcome everyone. This story reminds us that change requires both the person who refuses to accept injustice and the institutions willing to confront their own failures. Justice prevailed not because one man lost his job, but because one woman's composure under cruelty sparked a transformation that will protect countless others who simply want to shop, to exist, to be treated as human. If this story moved you, comment "Justice Prevails" below, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and remember that your voice matters when you witness wrong. Next week, another story about courage that changed everything. Thank you for watching.